the marketplace of souls. The air inside Nexus 7 trading station reeked of desperation and greed. Neon signs flickered in a dozen alien languages, casting sickly colors across the crowded marketplace. Captain Jonas Reed pulled his worn jacket tighter as he navigated through the chaos of merchants, smugglers, and creatures from across the galaxy. He wasn't here by choice. His cargo ship needed critical repairs, and this floating bazaar in the outer rim was his only option. Jonas had seen many things in his 15 years hauling freight between star systems, but the sight that stopped him cold made his stomach turn. In the shadowy corner of the station's main concourse, a section cordoned off with energy barriers housed what the locals called the labor market. It was slavery, plain and simple, though they dressed it up with fancy terms like indentured, servitude, and contract labor. The Viridian girl couldn't have been more than 20 in human years. Her skin held an ethereal quality, translucent patches that caught the station's harsh lights and threw them back in soft rainbow patterns. But those beautiful crystalline markings were now dulled with grime and exhaustion. Heavy shackles bound her wrists, connected to a short chain that kept her seated on the cold metal floor. Step right up, bellowed Grex, the Calorian slave trader. His massive frame towered over potential buyers, forearms gesticulating wildly as he hawked his merchandise. His reptilian hide was scarred from countless deals gone wrong, and his yellow eyes gleamed with avarice. Fresh stock from the Viridian colonies. Beautiful, exotic, perfect for domestic work or entertainment. Jonas felt his jaw clench. The Viridians were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful scholars and artists. Their homeworld had been devastated by mining corporations 3 years ago, leaving survivors scattered across refugee camps or worse. Places like this. "What's wrong with that one?" asked a gruff Taraxian merchant, pointing a clawed finger at the girl. "She looks half dead." Grex's expression soured. "Damaged goods, that one. Won't eat, won't speak, won't work. Been trying to move her for weeks. The stupid creature just sits there staring at nothing. Probably brain damaged from the colony raids." The girl's head lifted slightly at the words, and Jonas caught a glimpse of her eyes. They weren't empty or broken as Grex claimed. They burned with a quiet intelligence and something else. Defiance. She was listening to every word, understanding every insult, but choosing silence as her form of resistance. "How much?" Jonas found himself asking before he could stop the words. Grex turned his massive head toward the human captain. "For her? You got to be joking, Reed. I know you're not in that market." "How much?" Jonas repeated, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. The slave trader laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "She's worthless. Can't get her to do basic commands. The mining crews won't take defective workers, and the pleasure houses rejected her. I'm thinking of just spacing her and claiming the insurance loss." Jonas felt something cold settle in his chest. "Name your price, Grex." "You serious?" The Calorian's 4 eyes narrowed suspiciously. 500 credits, and that's me being generous. Usually I'd charge triple for a Viridian, but this one's more trouble than she's worth." Jonas reached into his jacket and pulled out his credit chip. 500 credits was nearly half his repair fund, money he desperately needed to fix his ship's navigation system. Without it, he'd be stranded on this cesspit of a station. But looking at the girl, really looking at her, he saw something the others missed. The way she held herself despite the chains, the careful attention she paid to everything around her, the slight tilt of her head that suggested she understood far more than she let on. "Deal," he said, placing the chip on Grex's scanner. The transaction completed with a soft chime, and the slave trader's demeanor shifted immediately to one of barely concealed glee. "Pleasure doing business, Captain. Here's her identification chip and ownership docs. Word of advice, don't expect much. That one's been nothing but problems since I acquired her." Jonas pocketed the documents without looking at them. "Release. Her. Your funeral," Grex muttered, producing a small device that caused the shackles to fall away with a soft click. The girl, Zara, according to the documents Jonas quickly scanned, rubbed her wrists where the metal had chafed. She looked up at him with those remarkable eyes, and he saw something that made his decision feel right despite its cost. She wasn't broken. She was waiting. "Can you walk?" Jonas asked softly in Galactic standard. Zara nodded once, a slight movement that somehow conveyed both dignity and caution. She rose to her feet with fluid grace, and Jonas noticed she was taller than he'd initially thought, perhaps 5.5 feet, with the lean build typical of her species. "Come on then," he said, not as an order but as an invitation. "Let's get out of here." As they walked away from the market section, Jonas could feel the weight of curious stares and whispered speculation. A human freight captain purchasing a Viridian slave was unusual enough to draw attention, and attention was the last thing he wanted on a station like Nexus 7. The journey to his docking bay took them through the station's maze-like corridors. Jonas kept his pace measured, allowing Zara to stay beside him rather than forcing her to follow behind like property. He noticed she moved with careful observation, her eyes cataloging exit routes, potential threats, and anything that might be useful later. Definitely not brain damaged, he thought. The drifter wasn't much to look at, a standard freight hauler with more patches than original hull plating, but she was home. Jonas led Zara up the loading ramp and into the ship's modest interior. The cargo hold was mostly empty except for some spare parts and emergency supplies. "This is it," he said, sealing the airlock behind them. "Not luxury accommodations, but it's clean and the recyclers work fine." Zara stood in the center of the hold, still silent but taking in every detail of her surroundings. Jonas realized she was probably trying to determine if this was just another form of captivity. "Look," he said, leaning against a cargo container. "I know you can understand me. Greg said you wouldn't talk, but I'm betting that's because you chose not to, not because you can't." Something flickered across her expression. Surprise maybe, or recognition. "Here's the thing," Jonas continued. "I didn't buy you to own you. I bought you to free you. Once we're clear of this station, you can go wherever you want. I'll drop you at any safe port, give you enough credits to get by for a while." Zara's head tilted slightly, and for the first time she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, with the musical quality typical of Viridian speech. "Why?" The simple question carried volumes of confusion, suspicion, and hope. Jonas considered his answer carefully. "Because slavery is wrong. Because nobody deserves to be treated like property. Because—" He paused, thinking of his own daughter, lost in the colony raids that had scattered so many families across the galaxy. Because someone should have done the same for people I cared about. Zara studied his face for a long moment, searching for deception or hidden motives. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her because some of the tension left her shoulders. "My name is Zara," she said formally. "I was a teacher on Viridian Prime before the raids. I taught younglings about the stars and the mathematics that govern their movements." "Jonas Reed," he replied with a slight smile. "I haul cargo between systems and occasionally make terrible financial decisions that somehow feel right." For the first time since he'd seen her in that market, Zara's expression softened into something that might have been the beginning of a smile. The ship's communication system crackled to life, interrupting the moment. "Captain Reed, this is Nexus Control. You're cleared for departure in 30 minutes. Safe travels." Jonas moved to the pilot's controls. "Better strap in. The artificial gravity on this old bucket can be temperamental during takeoff." As Zara secured herself in the passenger seat, Jonas began the departure sequence. The drifter's engines hummed to life, and slowly the trading station fell away behind them. Once they'd cleared the station's gravitational field and entered open space, Jonas engaged the autopilot and turned to his unexpected passenger. "So," he said, "where would you like to go?" Zara was quiet for a long time, staring out at the stars, through the forward viewport. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight of loss and determination that Jonas recognized all too well. "There is a place," she said slowly. "A hidden colony where survivors from the raids have gathered. They call it Haven's Rest, but I don't know if it still exists or if the coordinates I remember are still valid." Jonas nodded. "Then that's where we'll go. But Zara, if it's not there, or if it's not safe, you're welcome to stay aboard as long as you need. As crew, not as property. The ship could use a navigator who understands stellar mathematics. As the stars stretched into lines around them and they jumped to hyperspace, Zara allowed herself to hope for the first time in months. She had found something she never expected in the darkness of Nexus 7, a friend. The journey to freedom. The hyperspace jump lasted 6 hours, giving Jonas and Zara time to talk properly for the first time. Jonas prepared a simple meal from his ship's stores, protein bars and synthesized fruit juice, while Zara shared what she knew about Haven's Rest. The coordinates were given to me by another survivor on Nexus 7, she explained, accepting the food gratefully. Before Grex separated us for sale, her name was Lydia, and she said survivors from 12 different colony worlds had gathered there. But that was 3 months ago. Jonas studied the star charts on his navigation console. The location she gave you is in the Kepler Nebula. That's contested space, no government authority, lots of asteroid fields to hide in. Smart choice for a secret colony. You believe it exists? Zara asked, hope creeping into her voice. I've heard rumors, Jonas admitted. Free ports and hidden settlements are more common than most people think. The galaxy's a big place, and there are plenty of folks who prefer to stay off the official maps. As they talked, Jonas learned more about Zara's past. She had taught mathematics and stellar navigation to young Viridians on her homeworld, specializing in the complex calculations needed for long-range space travel. Her crystalline skin markings weren't just decorative, they were a form of biological computer that could process astronomical data at incredible speeds. That's why Grex thought you were defective, Jonas realized. He had no idea what those markings actually do. Zara touched one of the crystal patterns on her arm, which had begun to glow faintly in the ship's dim lighting. My people's abilities are not well known outside our homeworld. We preferred it that way. It kept us safe from those who would exploit us. Until the mining corporations came, Jonas said quietly. Zara's expression darkened. They wanted the rare crystals beneath our planet's surface. When we refused to abandon our cities, they simply destroyed them and took what they wanted anyway. The pain in her voice was raw and immediate. Jonas recognized it, the same grief he'd carried since losing his own family. He'd been off-world, on a cargo run when raiders hit the agricultural colony where his wife and daughter lived. By the time he returned, there was nothing left but burned fields and empty homes. I'm sorry, he said and meant it. You understand, Zara observed, studying his face. You have lost someone too. Jonas nodded, but didn't elaborate. Some wounds were too deep for casual conversation. The ship's proximity alarm chimed, indicating they were approaching their destination. Jonas returned to the pilot's seat and began the complex process of dropping out of hyperspace near the nebula's edge. The Kepler Nebula was a vast cloud of ionized gas and stellar debris, beautiful but treacherous to navigate. There, Zara said, pointing at the sensor display. Those asteroid signatures match the pattern Lydia described. Jonas adjusted their course, weaving the drifter between massive chunks of rock and ice. The nebula's gases played havoc with their sensors, creating false readings and dead zones in their communications. It was the perfect place to hide a colony, and the perfect place for an ambush. 2 ships coming up fast on our stern, Jonas announced, his hands flying over the controls. Looks like we've got company. The vessels were sleek and predatory, bounty hunters by the look of them. Jonas cursed under his breath. Someone had put a tracking device on his ship back at Nexus 7, probably Grex covering his bets in case Zara turned out to be more valuable than he'd thought. Can you outrun them? Zara asked, gripping her seat as the drifter shook under weapons fire. Not likely, Jonas replied grimly, but I can make them work for it. He dove deeper into the asteroid field, using the massive rocks as cover. The bounty hunters followed, their more maneuverable ships closing the distance despite the obstacles. Laser fire lit up the space around them, some shots coming dangerously close to the drifter's hull. There, Zara suddenly exclaimed, her crystalline markings flaring brightly. Hidden among those asteroids, I can see the pattern now. There's a structure there, masked by the rock formations. Jonas looked where she pointed and saw nothing but asteroids on his sensors. But he trusted her, enhanced perception. Hold on, he said, making a sharp turn toward the indicated coordinates. As they approached, what had appeared to be a large asteroid suddenly split open, revealing a hidden docking bay carved into the rock. Emergency lights guided them in, and, the moment the drifter crossed the threshold, massive blast doors sealed behind them, cutting off their pursuers. "Welcome to Haven's Rest," came a voice over the communication system. "Please power down your weapons and prepare for boarding inspection." The docking bay was larger than Jonas had expected, with room for dozens of ships. Most were small vessels, like his own, personal transports, light freighters, and converted civilian craft. All bore the scars of hard use and hasty repairs. These were the ships of refugees and survivors. A delegation of 3 beings approached the drifter as Jonas lowered the cargo ramp. The leader was human, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Beside her walked a tall, insectoid Thrakari and a stocky, bearded Durgan. "I'm Commander Victoria Santos," the woman announced as they entered the cargo hold. "This is my security chief, Click, and our chief engineer, Brahm. You've led some unwelcome attention to our doorstep." "Jonas Reed, captain of this vessel," Jonas replied formally. "The hunters were tracking us, not looking for you specifically. I have a passenger seeking sanctuary." Zara stepped forward, her crystalline markings pulsing with nervous energy. "My name is Zara of Viridian Prime. I was told this place offers safe haven for colony survivors." Commander Santos's stern expression softened slightly. "Another Viridian? We have 17 of your people here already, including the woman who gave you our coordinates. Lydia spoke of you, said you'd been captured by slavers." "Captain Reed freed me," Zara said simply, then glanced at Jonas with something like gratitude in her eyes. The commander studied Jonas with new interest. "That must have cost you. Viridian slaves don't come cheap, even damaged ones." "She wasn't damaged," Jonas replied. "She was fighting the only way she could." Click, the Thrakari security chief, chittered something in his native language. Santos nodded in response. "Click says those hunters won't give up easily. They'll patrol the area looking for another way in." "How long before they move on?" Jonas asked. "Could be days, could be weeks," Santos replied. "Depends on what they think you're worth. In the meantime, you're both welcome to stay. We can always use another ship captain, and Viridian navigators are worth their weight in quantum crystals." As they were given a tour of the hidden colony, Jonas was impressed by what the survivors had built. Haven's Rest was carved into a massive asteroid with multiple levels containing living quarters, workshops, hydroponic gardens, and even a small medical facility. Nearly 300 beings called it home. Refugees from dozens of worlds devastated by corporate raiders, slavers, and territorial wars. "How do you sustain all this?" Jonas asked as they passed through a bustling marketplace where colonists traded goods and services. "Salvage operations mostly," Santos explained. "The nebula is full of derelict ships and abandoned mining platforms. We strip them for parts and raw materials. Some of our people run trading missions to neutral ports, always carefully to avoid drawing attention." Zara was reunited with Lydia and other Viridian survivors in the colony's common area. The reunion was emotional but subdued. Too much loss lay between them and their homeworld. Jonas watched from a distance, not wanting to intrude on their private grief and healing. "She seems like a good person," Santos observed, joining him at the observation window that looked out over the colony's main level. "She is," Jonas agreed. "Smart too. Her navigation abilities saved us from those hunters." "Planning to stay?" the commander asked. Jonas considered the question. He'd spent years drifting from port to port, taking whatever cargo jobs came his way, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. But something about this place, these people, felt different. "For a while," he said finally. "My ship needs repairs anyway, and I have the feeling Zara could use some time to figure out what comes next." Over the following days, Jonas threw himself into helping the colony. His experience as a cargo hauler proved valuable. He knew which ports were safe, which officials could be bribed, and how to avoid imperial entanglements. Zara, meanwhile, worked with the colony's other navigators to improve their knowledge of safe hyperspace routes through the surrounding systems. It was during one of these planning sessions that they discovered something troubling. Zara's enhanced perception had detected subtle gravitational anomalies in the nebula, signs that someone was conducting systematic surveys of the area. "They're mapping every asteroid, every possible hiding place," she reported to Santos and the Colony Council. "It's only a matter of time before they find us." "Who?" Santos asked, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. "Grex," Jonas said grimly. "That Calorian doesn't give up easily, especially when he thinks there's profit involved. He's probably convinced someone that this colony is worth the investment in a proper search operation." The council meeting that followed was tense. Some argued for abandoning Haven's Rest and scattering before they were discovered. Others insisted they should stand and fight for the home they'd built. Jonas found himself in the unexpected position of offering tactical advice. "Running won't solve the problem," he pointed out. "Grex will just track down the next group of survivors and do this all over again. But if we take him out of the equation permanently—" "You're talking about murder," one of the council members objected. "I'm talking about survival," Jonas replied. "Sometimes there's no clean solution." Zara, who had been silent throughout the debate, finally spoke. "There might be another way. My people have abilities that could help, if we're willing to take a significant risk." She explained her idea, and even Jonas had to admit it was audacious. Using her crystalline markings to interface directly with the colony's sensor array, Zara could extend their detection range far beyond normal parameters. They could track every ship in the nebula, predict patrol patterns, and maybe, just maybe, turn the hunters into the hunted. "It's dangerous," Santos warned. "That kind of neural interface could damage your nervous system permanently. The alternative is watching everyone here die or scatter," Zara replied with quiet determination. "I won't let that happen. Not again." As the colony prepared for what might be their final stand, Jonas found himself thinking about the strange turns his life had taken. A week ago, he'd been a simple cargo hauler worried about repair bills. Now he was part of something larger, a community worth fighting for, and a friendship that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances. "Ready?" he asked Zara as she prepared to link with the colony's systems. She placed her hand on his arm, her crystalline markings glowing softly. "Thank you, Jonas, for everything." "Thank me after we survive this," he replied with a smile. "Then we can figure out what comes next." As Zara began the dangerous neural interface that would either save them all or cost her everything, Jonas realized that somewhere in the depths of space among refugees and survivors, he had found something he thought he'd lost forever: hope for the future and people worth protecting. The real test was just beginning.